I stood in the kitchen of our Denver home, watching steam rise from my coffee cup while the morning light filtered through the curtains I had chosen 7 years ago. The house felt different lately, heavier somehow, as though the walls themselves knew something I refused to acknowledge. My husband Gregory moved past me without a word, his phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something the person on the other end said. He had been laughing a lot recently, just never with me. We had built this life together, or so I thought. I was 42 years old, and for the past 15 years, I had poured everything into our marriage and our pharmaceutical distribution company. While Gregory handled client relations and sales, I managed the operations, finances, and logistics that kept our business running smoothly. It was unglamorous work, the kind that happened behind closed doors, but it was essential. Every shipment tracked, every invoice processed, every regulatory document filed. That was my domain. Gregory finished his call and glanced at me briefly. "I have a meeting downtown," he said, already moving toward the door. "Do not wait up." "It is 8 in the morning," I replied, but he was already gone. The distance between us had grown slowly, so gradually that I had almost convinced myself it was normal. Marriages evolved, I told myself. People changed, but deep down, in the part of myself I tried to ignore, I knew something was fundamentally wrong. Gregory stayed out later, came home smelling of unfamiliar perfume, and looked at me as though I were an inconvenience rather than his partner. I finished my coffee and drove to our office, a modest building on the outskirts of the city where we ran our operations. The pharmaceutical distribution business was competitive and demanding, requiring meticulous attention to detail and unwavering compliance with regulations. I had spent years building relationships with manufacturers and healthcare facilities, ensuring our supply chain remained flawless. My assistant, Patricia, greeted me with a worried expression. "Mary, we need to talk about the inventory reports. Some numbers are not adding up." I followed her to my office, where she spread several documents across my desk. As I reviewed them, a cold sensation settled in my stomach. Discrepancies appeared throughout the past 6 months, small enough to overlook individually, but collectively troubling. Shipments that should have generated revenue seemed to disappear into administrative gaps. "Has Gregory seen these?" I asked. Patricia hesitated. "He told me not to bother you with operational details anymore. Said he would handle it directly." The cold sensation intensified. Gregory had never shown interest in the detailed operational work before. His strength was relationships and sales, not logistics and compliance. Why would he suddenly want to handle inventory discrepancies? I spent the rest of the day digging deeper, cross-referencing shipping manifests with financial records. The more I searched, the more irregularities I found. Nothing obviously criminal, but enough inconsistencies to suggest someone was either incompetent or deliberately obscuring information. Gregory returned to the office late in the afternoon, breezing through with barely a glance in my direction. "We need to discuss these inventory reports," I said, holding up the documents. He waved dismissively. "I am handling it. Do not worry about things you do not understand." The condescension in his tone struck me like a physical blow. I had built the operational infrastructure of this company. I understood it better than anyone. "Gregory, these are serious discrepancies. We could face regulatory issues if—" "I said I am handling it, Mary." His voice carried an edge I had never heard before. "Focus on your paperwork and let me run the business." He left before I could respond, and I sat alone in my office, staring at the documents spread before me. Something was very wrong, and my husband clearly had no intention of being honest with me about it. That evening, I returned home to an empty house. Gregory did not come back until after midnight, and when he did, he went straight to the guest bedroom without a word. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what was happening to my marriage and my business. The next morning, I decided to take action. If Gregory would not tell me the truth, I would find it myself. I contacted an old friend from college, Diane, who now worked as a private investigator. We met at a quiet cafe on the other side of town. "I need to know what my husband is doing," I told her, feeling simultaneously foolish and justified. "I think he might be hiding something, either personally or professionally. Maybe both." Diane listened without judgment, taking notes as I described the inventory discrepancies, Gregory's increasingly distant behavior, and the late nights that had become routine. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. "I will find out what is going on." Those 2 weeks felt like an eternity. I continued working, maintaining the facade of normalcy, while anxiety gnawed at me constantly. Gregory barely spoke to me, treating me like a roommate rather than a spouse. At the office, he held meetings behind closed doors and spoke in hushed tones on phone calls. I caught him once, laughing with someone on the other end about finally being free soon. The words haunted me. Free from what? From me? When Diane finally called, her tone was somber. "We need to meet. I have information, and you are not going to like it." The coffee shop Diane chose was nearly empty at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. She sat in a corner booth, a manila folder on the table in front of her. As I approached, I could see the sympathy in her eyes, and my stomach twisted with dread. "Just tell me," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. Diane opened the folder and pushed several photographs toward me. They showed Gregory with a woman I did not recognize, someone younger with perfectly styled hair and expensive clothes. The images captured them at restaurants, outside a downtown apartment building, and in one particularly damning shot, kissing in his car. "Her name is Valerie," Diane said quietly. "She works in real estate. They have been seeing each other for at least 8 months, possibly longer. 8 months. While I had been managing our business, ensuring compliance with every regulation, tracking every shipment, and keeping our operation profitable, my husband had been building a separate life with someone else. The betrayal burned through me, but Diane was not finished. "There is more," she continued, pulling out additional documents. "Gregory has been systematically moving assets out of the company. He has been creating what looks like legitimate business expenses, but the money is actually going into accounts that only he controls. He has also been meeting with a divorce attorney for the past 3 months. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table, forcing myself to breathe. He is planning to divorce me. Yes, and based on what my contact found, he is setting things up to make it look like the business is worth far less than it actually is. He has been inflating expenses, hiding revenue, and creating a paper trail that suggests the company is barely breaking even. If you went into a divorce proceeding without knowing this, you would walk away with almost nothing, while he keeps the actual assets he has hidden." I stared at the documents, my mind racing. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building a business together, and this was how it ended. Not with honest conversation or mutual respect, but with calculated deception, designed to leave me with nothing. "There is something else," Diane said, her expression darkening. "Valerie is not just his mistress. She has also been working as a consultant for your company, billing for services she never actually provided. Gregory has been paying her through the business, essentially using your joint assets to fund his affair and set up his new life." The audacity of it took my breath away. He had not just betrayed me personally, he had stolen from our business, the company I had worked tirelessly to build and maintain. Every late night I had spent ensuring compliance, every problem I had solved, every relationship I had nurtured. He was using all of it to fund his escape and his affair. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Diane leaned forward. "You document everything. You get ahead of this. He thinks you are clueless, which gives you an advantage. He is going to file for divorce soon, probably within the next month based on what my sources indicate. You need to be ready." I left the coffee shop with the folder tucked under my arm, my mind churning with emotions I could barely process. Anger, betrayal, humiliation, they all swirled together into something cold and determined. Gregory had underestimated me, treated me like I was too stupid or too complacent to notice what he was doing. He was about to learn exactly how wrong he was. Over the next 3 weeks, I became someone I barely recognized. During the day, I played the role of the oblivious wife, going through the motions at work while Gregory continued his charade. But at night, I worked with Diane and a forensic accountant named Bernard, meticulously documenting every irregularity in our business finances. Bernard was a meticulous man in his 60s who had spent decades untangling complex financial schemes. He reviewed our company records with the intensity of someone solving a puzzle, and what he found was damning. "Your husband is not very good at hiding his tracks," Bernard said during one of our late-night meetings at his office. "He has been diverting funds for months, but he made mistakes. The payments to Valerie, for instance, are clearly not legitimate consulting fees. The invoices are vague, the work product is non-existent, and the timing coincides exactly with when their affair started, according to your investigator's timeline." "Can we prove it?" I asked. "Absolutely. But there is more. He has also been underreporting revenue from several of your major clients. The actual payments come in, but he records them as partial payments or delayed shipments. The difference goes into a separate account. Over the past year, he has moved approximately $400,000 out of the business this way." $400,000. The number staggered me. That was not just marital assets. That was theft from our jointly owned company. It was fraud, and it gave me leverage I had not anticipated. "What about the business valuation?" I asked. "If we go to divorce court, how will this affect what the company is worth?" Bernard smiled grimly. "If he presents the doctored books he has been creating, the company will look nearly worthless. But with the actual financial records, the ones showing the real revenue and the money he has been stealing, the business is worth approximately $3 million, maybe more. The difference between what he will claim and what it is actually worth is substantial." I sat back, letting the information sink in. Gregory thought he was going to walk away from our marriage with most of the assets while leaving me with scraps. He had no idea I knew about his scheme. No idea I had spent weeks building an airtight case against him. "We need a lawyer," I said. "Someone who specializes in complex divorce cases involving business assets." Diane had already anticipated this. "I know someone. Her name is Janet, and she is excellent. She handles high-stakes divorces, and she does not lose." Janet turned out to be a woman in her early 50s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. Her office in downtown Denver was understated but elegant, the kind of place that communicated competence without ostentation. She listened to my story without interruption, occasionally taking notes, her expression neutral. When I finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers. "Your husband has made several critical mistakes. The most significant is that he has committed what amounts to fraud against your jointly owned business. That changes everything. This is not just a matter of dividing marital assets. This is a case where one party has been actively stealing from the marital estate." "What does that mean for the divorce?" I asked. "It means we have leverage," Janet said. "In Colorado, marital property is divided equitably, which usually means roughly equal. But when one spouse has been hiding assets, committing fraud, or otherwise acting in bad faith, the court can and will adjust the division accordingly. Your husband thinks he is going to present falsified financials and walk away with the lion's share of everything. Instead, we are going to present the truth and watch his entire plan collapse." She leaned forward, her expression intense. "But we need to be strategic. If we reveal what we know too early, he might try to cover his tracks or create additional complications. We wait until we are in court, until he is committed to his version of events under oath. Then we bring out the evidence. The impact will be devastating, both legally and personally." "He has been meeting with Valerie regularly," I said. "They think I have no idea." "Good. Let him think that. Let him believe you are going to be an easy target. The more confident he is, the more careless he will be. Over the next month, I watched my marriage die in slow motion while simultaneously preparing for war. Gregory finally served me with divorce papers on a Thursday afternoon, having them delivered to our home by a process server while he conveniently happened to be out of town. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and proposed a division of assets that was laughably one-sided. According to his filing, the business was worth approximately $600,000, a gross undervaluation based on the fraudulent financials he had been creating. He proposed keeping the business and giving me $300,000 as my share, along with the house, which still had a substantial mortgage. In reality, this would leave him with millions in hidden assets, while I received less than a quarter of what I was entitled to. I read the papers with Janet in her office, and she shook her head in disgust. "He really thinks you are going to accept this. He has no idea what is coming." We filed our response, contesting his valuation and requesting a full forensic audit of the business. Gregory's lawyer fought this, of course, but the court granted our motion. The audit would be conducted by an independent accountant appointed by the court, and it would reveal the truth about what Gregory had been hiding. I could see the worry starting to creep into Gregory's expression when he learned about the audit. He tried to talk to me one evening when we were both at the house, an occurrence that had become increasingly rare. "This audit is unnecessary," he said, attempting to sound reasonable. "It is just going to cost us both money and delay everything. Why do you not just accept the settlement I proposed?" "It is fair." I looked at him. This man I had loved and trusted, and felt nothing but cold determination. "I will see you in court, Gregory." His expression hardened. "You are making a mistake. You are not going to get more than what I offered. You should take it while you can." The thinly veiled threat did not frighten me. I had spent weeks preparing for this, building an unassailable case with the help of people who actually knew what they were doing. Gregory thought he was clever, but he was merely predictable. The court-appointed auditor, a stern woman named Frances, spent 2 weeks examining our business records. She had the authority to access everything, including the accounts Gregory thought were hidden. I watched him grow increasingly agitated as the audit progressed, making frequent calls to his attorney and spending long hours away from the office. When Frances submitted her report to the court, Janet called me immediately. "It is better than we hoped." She found everything: the hidden accounts, the payments to Valerie, the underreported revenue. She valued the business at $3.2 million and noted evidence of potential fraud that she is recommending be referred to the district attorney. The district attorney. Gregory was not just facing an unfavorable divorce settlement, he was potentially facing criminal charges. Our court date was set for a Friday morning in late October. I spent the night before reviewing documents with Janet, going over every detail of our strategy. She was confident, but I was terrified. This was it. The moment when everything I had been working toward would either succeed or fail. I barely slept, and when morning came, I dressed carefully in a navy suit that projected confidence and competence. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. I had spent so many years being accommodating, being the person who handled problems quietly and kept things running smoothly. That version of myself was gone, replaced by someone harder and more determined. The courthouse was the imposing building downtown, all stone and glass, representing the weight of justice. Janet met me on the steps, carrying her briefcase and wearing an expression that reminded me of a predator about to strike. "Remember," she said as we walked inside, "let him commit to his story. Let him lie under oath. Then we present the truth." We entered the courtroom, and I saw Gregory for the first time in weeks. He sat with his attorney, a slick-looking man named Peter, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics. Gregory looked confident, almost smug, as though this was merely an inconvenience he had to endure before moving on to his new life with Valerie. He had no idea what was coming, and as I took my seat, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. He had laughed at me, dismissed me, stolen from me, and betrayed me. Now, finally, he was going to face the consequences. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, more intimate, which somehow made everything feel more intense. Judge Harrison presided, a man in his early 60s with gray hair and an expression that suggested he had seen every possible variety of human deception. He reviewed the preliminary documents while Gregory and I sat on opposite sides of the room, separated by more than just physical distance. Gregory's attorney, Peter, stood first to present their case. He was smooth and confident, painting a picture of a struggling business that had barely survived recent market pressures. According to his narrative, Gregory had worked tirelessly to keep the pharmaceutical distribution company afloat, while I had handled minor administrative tasks. "My client has been the driving force behind this business," Peter said, gesturing toward Gregory. "He built the client relationships, secured the contracts, and navigated the competitive landscape. The business, while it provided a modest living, is not the valuable asset Mrs. Mary seems to believe. The independent valuation my client obtained places its worth at approximately $600,000, and Mr. Gregory is being more than generous in offering his wife half that amount, plus their home." I watched Gregory nod along, his expression serious and concerned, as though he genuinely cared about being fair. The performance was impressive. If I had not known the truth, I might have believed it myself. Peter continued, presenting the falsified financial documents that Gregory had carefully constructed over the past year. Revenue reports that showed declining income, expense reports that were inflated with fraudulent consulting fees, and projections that painted a bleak picture of the company's future. It was a comprehensive fiction, and Peter delivered it with absolute conviction. "Mrs. Mary is understandably emotional about the end of their marriage," Peter said, his tone sympathetic. "But emotion cannot change the financial reality. The business simply is not worth what she seems to think it is worth. My client is proposing a fair settlement that will allow both parties to move forward with their lives." Judge Harrison listened without expression, occasionally making notes. When Peter finished, he looked toward Janet. "Counsel, do you wish to present your case?" Janet stood, and I could see the anticipation in her posture. "Yes, Your Honor. But first, I would like to ask Mr. Gregory a few questions under oath." Gregory took the stand, looking confident. He answered the preliminary questions easily, confirming his name, his role in the business, his understanding of their financial situation. Then Janet began to probe deeper. "Mr. Gregory, you testified that the business is worth approximately $600,000, correct?" "That is correct." "And this valuation is based on the financial records you provided to your independent appraiser?" "Yes, it is." "Can you confirm that you personally prepared many of these financial reports?" Gregory hesitated slightly. "I worked with our accountant, but yes, I was involved in preparing them." "Were you also involved in managing the company's operational finances, tracking shipments, processing invoices, that sort of thing?" "I oversaw it, yes." Janet smiled slightly. "That is interesting, because my understanding was that your wife handled all operational and financial management, while you focused on sales and client relations. Has that changed recently?" I could see the tension creeping into Gregory's shoulders. "I have always been involved in all aspects of the business." "Let me ask you about some specific transactions," Janet said, pulling out a document. "Over the past 8 months, your company paid a consultant named Valerie approximately $75,000. Can you describe what services she provided?" The color drained from Gregory's face. He glanced at Peter, who looked equally concerned. "She provided marketing consultation." "Marketing consultation for a pharmaceutical distribution company? What specific marketing strategies did she implement?" "Various strategies. I do not have the details memorized." "Can you provide any documentation of the work she performed? Reports, presentations, email correspondence?" Gregory shifted uncomfortably. "I would have to review our files." "Please do that," Janet said sweetly. "I will wait." The silence stretched as Gregory clearly struggled to produce something that did not exist. Finally, Peter intervened. "Your Honor, This line of questioning seems designed to embarrass rather than illuminate the relevant financial issues. Judge Harrison looked at Janet. Counsel, where are you going with this? Your Honor, I am establishing a pattern of fraudulent expenses that have artificially deflated the apparent value of the marital business. This consultant, Valerie, provided no actual services. She is, in fact, Mr. Gregory's mistress, and these payments were simply a way to funnel marital assets to her, while creating the appearance of legitimate business expenses. The courtroom went absolutely silent. Gregory's face flushed red, and I could see the fury in his eyes. Peter was on his feet immediately. Your Honor, these are serious allegations without foundation. They have significant foundation, Janet interrupted calmly. She approached the bench with a folder. I have documentation here showing the relationship between Mr. Gregory and Valerie, including photographs, witness statements, and financial records. I also have expert testimony from a forensic accountant who has identified approximately $400,000 in fraudulent transactions over the past year. Judge Harrison took the folder and began reviewing its contents. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. I watched Gregory's confident facade crumble, replaced by barely controlled panic. He leaned over to whisper urgently with Peter, who looked increasingly distressed as he realized the situation they were in. After several minutes, Judge Harrison looked up. His expression had shifted from neutral to distinctly displeased. Mr. Gregory, you are still under oath. I am going to ask you directly. Have you been deliberately misrepresenting the financial condition of your business in order to secure a more favorable divorce settlement? Gregory opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Peter, who seemed unable to provide guidance. Finally, he said, I may have made some accounting errors. Accounting errors, Judge Harrison repeated, his tone making clear what he thought of that characterization. Counsel, I am going to need more information about these alleged irregularities before we proceed. Janet had been waiting for this moment. She presented Bernard, our forensic accountant, who took the stand with an air of professional competence. He laid out the evidence methodically, explaining each fraudulent transaction and hidden account with the precision of someone who had spent decades analyzing financial deception. The pattern is consistent and deliberate, Bernard testified. Revenue was systematically underreported, with actual client payments being diverted to accounts controlled solely by Mr. Gregory. Expenses were inflated through payments to vendors who provided no real services. And legitimate business costs were manipulated to create the appearance of financial distress, where none actually existed. He presented charts and spreadsheets that painted an irrefutable picture. The real value of our business was not $600,000. It was over $3 million. Gregory had stolen from our joint enterprise to enrich himself while planning to leave me with a fraction of what I was owed. Peter tried to mount a defense, suggesting that these were simply differences in accounting methodology. But his arguments sounded weak even to my untrained ear. Judge Harrison cut him off midway through an explanation. Counsel, I have reviewed the evidence presented by the opposing party. These are not accounting differences. This appears to be a systematic effort to defraud both your client's spouse and potentially the court itself. Do you have any substantive response to these allegations? Peter conferred with Gregory in hushed, urgent tones. I could see Gregory's hands shaking, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. He had walked into this courtroom expecting an easy victory, a rubber stamp on his carefully constructed fraud. Instead, his entire scheme was being exposed in meticulous detail. Your Honor, Peter finally said, we request a recess to review this new information and consult with our client. Denied, Judge Harrison said flatly. You have had ample opportunity to present accurate financial information. The time for games is over. Counsel for the petitioner, do you have additional evidence to present? Janet did. She called the court-appointed auditor, Francis, who confirmed everything Bernard had testified to. She had found the same discrepancies, the same hidden accounts, the same pattern of fraudulent transactions. Her report recommended not just an adjustment to the divorce settlement, but referral to law enforcement for possible criminal prosecution. In my 30 years of conducting financial audits, Francis testified, I have rarely seen such a blatant attempt to hide assets and defraud a spouse. The evidence is overwhelming, and the methodology was both systematic and intentional. Gregory sat motionless, staring at the table in front of him. I wondered what he was thinking, whether he was calculating his next move or simply drowning in the realization that his plan had failed spectacularly. Part of me felt a savage satisfaction at his distress. This was the man who had betrayed me, stolen from me, and planned to leave me destitute. Now he was facing the consequences. Janet returned to her seat, and Judge Harrison spent several minutes reviewing documents. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. Finally, he looked up and addressed Gregory directly. "Mr. Gregory, I am going to give you one opportunity to explain yourself, and I strongly suggest you tell the complete truth, because if you lie to me again, you will regret it. Did you deliberately falsify financial records to misrepresent the value of your business in these divorce proceedings?" Gregory stood slowly. His voice, when he spoke, was barely audible. "Yes, Your Honor." "And did you divert marital assets to an account controlled solely by yourself?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And did you use marital funds to pay for personal expenses related to an extramarital affair?" Gregory's jaw clenched. "Yes, Your Honor." The admissions hung in the air. Judge Harrison's expression was cold. "Thank you for your honesty, belated as it is. Please be seated." As Gregory sat down, I saw him glance in my direction. There was no smugness now, no condescension, just fear and anger. He had underestimated me completely, and the realization was written across his face. Judge Harrison addressed both attorneys. "We are going to take a brief recess while I review all the evidence presented today. When we return, I will issue my ruling on the division of marital assets. I am also going to be referring this matter to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal charges. We are in recess." The gavel struck, and people began filing out of the courtroom. I remained seated, my legs shaking with adrenaline. Janet put a hand on my shoulder. "You did perfectly. Just remain calm for a little longer." During the recess, I stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, trying to process what had just happened. I had watched my husband admit under oath to defrauding me, to stealing from our joint business, to systematically planning to leave me with nothing. The betrayal I had discovered weeks ago was now a matter of public record, and the consequences were only beginning. Gregory and Peter huddled in a corner, their conversation intense and clearly contentious. I saw Peter gesturing emphatically, probably explaining just how badly things were going. Gregory looked pale and drawn, nothing like the confident man who had walked into court that morning. Diane appeared beside me, having attended the proceedings as a witness in case her testimony was needed. "That was brutal," she said quietly, "but necessary. He deserves everything that is coming." "Is it wrong that I feel no sympathy for him?" I asked. "Not even a little bit," Diane replied. "He made his choices. Now he faces the results." When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Harrison already sat at the bench, his expression grave. "I have reviewed all evidence presented today, including the testimony of multiple expert witnesses and the sworn admissions of Mr. Gregory. What I have seen disturbs me greatly. This court takes allegations of fraud very seriously, particularly when one party attempts to use legal proceedings as a tool for continued deception." Judge Harrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "The evidence presented makes clear that Mr. Gregory has engaged in a systematic effort to hide marital assets, falsify business records, and defraud both his spouse and potentially this court. His actions demonstrate a complete disregard for his legal and ethical obligations." He looked directly at Gregory. "Mr. Gregory, your testimony today revealed that you diverted approximately $400,000 in marital assets to accounts you controlled exclusively. You paid your mistress $75,000 from business funds for services she never provided. You deliberately underreported business revenue to make your company appear less valuable than it actually is. These are not minor indiscretions or accounting errors. These are calculated acts of fraud." Gregory remained silent, his face ashen. I had imagined this moment during the long nights of preparation, but the reality was even more satisfying than I had anticipated. The man who had dismissed me as someone too naive to notice his schemes was now being dressed down by a judge who clearly had no patience for his deception. The court finds that the true value of the marital business, based on forensic accounting and independent audit, is approximately $3.2 million. Judge Harrison continued. This is more than 5 times the value Mr. Gregory claimed in his initial filing. The discrepancy is not accidental. It is the result of deliberate fraud. He paused, letting that sink in. In Colorado, marital property is typically divided equitably. However, when one spouse has engaged in fraud, hidden assets, or otherwise acted in bad faith, the court has discretion to adjust the division to reflect that misconduct. Given the egregious nature of Mr. Gregory's actions, I am awarding Mrs. Mary 70% of all marital assets, including the business. I felt Janet squeeze my hand under the table. 70%. That was not just fair, it was punitive, a clear message that fraud would not be rewarded. Mr. Gregory will receive 30% of the marital assets, Judge Harrison continued. However, he will first be required to return all funds he illegally diverted, approximately $400,000, which will be added to the marital estate before division. He will also be responsible for all legal fees incurred by both parties in these proceedings, as his fraud necessitated the extensive forensic accounting and legal work required to uncover the truth. Peter was on his feet. Your Honor, this division is extraordinarily punitive. Your client committed fraud, Judge Harrison interrupted. He stole from his wife, lied under oath, and attempted to manipulate these proceedings for his personal benefit. He is fortunate that I am only adjusting the division of assets and not holding him in contempt. Sit down, counsel. Peter sat. Judge Harrison was not finished. Additionally, Mr. Gregory is hereby ordered to transfer all business interest to Mrs. Mary within 30 days. She will have sole control and ownership of the pharmaceutical distribution company, given that she has been managing the actual operations while Mr. Gregory was occupied with his extramarital activities and fraudulent schemes. I see no reason why she cannot continue to run the business successfully without him. The impact of this hit me fully. I would not just receive a share of the business. I would own it entirely. The company I had built, the operations I had managed, the relationships I had nurtured, they would be mine alone. Gregory would be completely removed from the enterprise he had tried to steal from me. As for the marital home, Judge Harrison continued, it will be awarded to Mrs. Mary. Mr. Gregory will vacate the premises within 7 days. Gregory finally spoke, his voice cracking. Your Honor, this is everything. You are leaving me with nothing. Judge Harrison looked at him with something approaching contempt. Mr. Gregory, you attempted to leave your wife with nothing after 15 years of marriage and partnership. You stole from your joint business, committed fraud, and betrayed her trust in the most fundamental ways. The division I am ordering leaves you with considerably more than you deserve. You should be grateful I am not recommending immediate incarceration pending criminal investigation. He shuffled his papers. This brings me to my final point. Based on the evidence presented today, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal charges, including fraud, embezzlement, and theft. Mr. Gregory should consider retaining criminal defense counsel. The gavel came down, and it was over. Gregory sat motionless, the reality of his situation clearly overwhelming him. He had walked into court expecting to charm a judge and walk away with millions in hidden assets. Instead, he was leaving with almost nothing and facing potential criminal prosecution. I stood on shaking legs, and Janet embraced me quickly. We did it, she whispered. You did it. As we gathered our materials, I saw Gregory turn toward me. For a moment our eyes met, and I saw the full depth of his shock and fury. He had underestimated me completely, treated me as an obstacle to be easily overcome. Now he understood exactly what that mistake had cost him. This is not over, he said, his voice low and threatening. Yes, it is, I replied calmly. You just have not accepted it yet. Peter pulled Gregory away before he could respond, and they left the courtroom in a rush. Janet and I followed more slowly, and as we emerged into the hallway, I felt a wave of exhaustion mixed with fierce satisfaction. Months of investigation, preparation, and strategy had culminated in this moment. Gregory's carefully constructed fraud had been exposed and punished. Diane waited outside, and she hugged me tightly. I listened from the gallery. That judge eviscerated him. It was beautiful. We went to a nearby restaurant, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Janet explained what would happen next. The transfer of business assets, the collection of the funds Gregory had stolen, the ongoing criminal investigation. It would take time, but the outcome was clear. I had won, completely and unequivocally. What about Valerie? I asked. Does she face any consequences? Janet smiled grimly. She accepted payment for services she did not provide. That is fraud. If the district attorney pursues criminal charges against Gregory, she will likely be included in that investigation. At minimum, she will probably be required to return the money she received. At maximum, she could face criminal charges herself. The thought of Valerie facing consequences alongside Gregory felt right. She had not been an innocent bystander in his scheme. She had actively participated in defrauding our business, and by extension, me. Over the following weeks, the reality of my victory became concrete. Gregory returned the $400,000 he had stolen, though I suspected he had to liquidate personal assets to do so. He vacated our home, moving out in sullen silence while I watched from the doorway. The business was formally transferred to my sole ownership, and I began the process of rebuilding what he had damaged. The most satisfying moment came when I changed the locks on the office building and updated all business registrations to reflect my sole ownership. Gregory had spent years treating me as though I were merely support staff in our joint enterprise. Now the enterprise was mine, and he was gone. The weeks following the court ruling transformed my life in ways I had not anticipated. Taking full control of the pharmaceutical distribution company meant stepping into a role I had always performed, but never been credited for. I met with our major clients personally, assuring them that operations would continue seamlessly despite the ownership change. Most of them had worked primarily with me anyway, trusting my attention to detail and regulatory compliance. Honestly, Mary, I am relieved, said Thomas, the procurement director at one of our largest hospital networks. Gregory was always charming, but you were the one who actually ensured our shipments arrived on time and properly documented. I am glad you are running things now. His words, echoed by other clients, revealed something I had suspected but never fully acknowledged. I had been the backbone of the business all along. Gregory had taken credit for relationships I had built and maintained through competent, reliable service. Without him, the company did not suffer. It thrived. I hired Patricia as my operations manager, giving her the recognition and compensation she had always deserved. Together, we streamlined processes that Gregory had needlessly complicated, often to disguise his fraudulent activities. We discovered additional irregularities he had left behind, including vendor agreements that existed solely to funnel money to shell companies he controlled. He was incredibly sloppy once you look closely, Patricia said one afternoon as we reviewed contracts. He thought he was being clever, but really he was just careless. He assumed nobody would check. His assumption that I would remain ignorant had been his greatest mistake. I had checked, and I had done so thoroughly. The criminal investigation proceeded methodically. A detective named Sylvia contacted me several times, asking detailed questions about business operations and financial transactions. She was a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor and an obvious distaste for white-collar criminals. Your husband thought he was untouchable, Sylvia said during one of our meetings. That kind of arrogance usually leads to exactly what happened to him. We see it constantly. Someone gets comfortable committing fraud, stops being careful, and eventually leaves evidence everywhere. What will happen to him? I asked. That depends on several factors, including whether he cooperates and whether the district attorney wants to pursue charges aggressively. But based on what we have found, he is looking at potential felony charges for embezzlement and fraud. If convicted, he could face prison time and would definitely face significant fines and restitution requirements. The idea of Gregory in prison felt surreal. I had spent 15 years with this man, shared a home and a life with him. Now he faced criminal prosecution because of his own choices. I felt no sympathy, only a cold satisfaction that justice was being served. Valerie faced her own reckoning. The district attorney issued a subpoena for her financial records, and she was questioned about the payments she had received from our company. According to Sylvia, Valerie had initially tried to claim the consulting fees were legitimate, but when pressed to provide any evidence of work performed, she had nothing. Her relationship with Gregory, documented extensively by Diane's investigation, made the fraudulent nature of the payments obvious. She has hired an attorney, Sylvia told me. My guess is she will eventually agree to return the money and cooperate with our investigation of Gregory in exchange for reduced charges. She is not the primary target. He is. I imagined Valerie, who had enjoyed spending my money while sleeping with my husband, now facing legal consequences. The poetic justice appealed to me. She had participated eagerly in Gregory's scheme, enjoying the benefits without considering the cost. Now the bill was due. The business continued to grow under my leadership. Without Gregory's fraudulent expenses draining resources, our profit margins improved dramatically. I negotiated new contracts with pharmaceutical manufacturers, expanding our product lines and service areas. The work was demanding, but I found it deeply satisfying. Every successful deal, every satisfied client, every month of increased revenue was proof that I had never needed Gregory's supposed business acumen. One afternoon, about 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected call from Peter, Gregory's former attorney. Mrs. Mary, I am calling on behalf of my former client. He would like to meet with you to discuss a potential settlement regarding some remaining financial matters. What financial matters? I asked coolly. The court was very clear about the division of assets. There are some business contacts and opportunities that Gregory believes he could help you access, for a reasonable consulting fee, of course. He thinks there might be a way for you both to benefit from his industry connections. The audacity was breathtaking. Gregory, who had been stripped of everything through his own fraud, was now trying to sell me access to business contacts that I had likely developed in the first place. He was attempting to create relevance where none existed. Tell your former client that I have no interest in any arrangement with him, I said. The business relationships he thinks he controls were built on my operational competence, not his charm. I do not need his help, and I certainly will not pay him for it. Peter sighed. I will convey your message. After hanging up, I sat for a moment, marveling at Gregory's continued delusion. Even after losing everything, facing criminal charges, and being publicly exposed as a fraud, he still believed he had something I needed. The man who had dismissed me as incompetent now wanted me to pay him for advice I did not require. I never heard from him again directly, but news reached me through various channels. Gregory had moved into a small apartment on the outskirts of Denver, paid for with what remained of his share of the marital assets after returning the stolen funds and paying legal fees. His reputation in the pharmaceutical distribution industry was destroyed. Word had spread about the divorce proceedings and the fraud he had committed. No one wanted to do business with someone who had stolen from his own company and lied under oath. Spring arrived, bringing with it a sense of renewal. The business was thriving, and I was expanding into new markets. I hired additional staff, including a sales director named Kevin, who brought fresh energy and legitimate industry connections. Unlike Gregory, Kevin actually worked for his salary, developing client relationships through competence and integrity rather than deception. You have built something impressive here, Kevin said during one of our strategy meetings. The operational infrastructure is solid, the client relationships are strong, and the growth potential is substantial. Whoever managed operations before, clearly knew what they were doing. "That would be me," I said with a slight smile. "Then I am working for exactly the right person." The criminal case against Gregory moved forward. The district attorney filed formal charges: 3 counts of embezzlement, 2 counts of fraud, and 1 count of making false statements under oath. Valerie was charged as an accessory to fraud, though her charges were less severe since she had agreed to cooperate with the prosecution and return the money she had received. Sylvia kept me informed of developments. Gregory is maintaining his innocence publicly, but his attorney is quietly trying to negotiate a plea deal. The evidence is overwhelming. If this goes to trial, he will almost certainly be convicted, and the sentence would be harsher than if he accepts responsibility now. "What kind of sentence is he looking at?" I asked. "With a plea deal, probably 2 to 3 years in prison plus restitution and fines. If he goes to trial and loses, could be 5 years or more. Either way, he is going to prison. It is just a question of how long." The trial date was set for late summer, though Sylvia predicted Gregory would accept a plea deal before then. Men like him usually do. They are comfortable with fraud and deception when they think they can get away with it, but they do not have the courage to face the consequences. He will eventually take the deal. While Gregory's legal troubles unfolded, I focused on building the life he had tried to take from me. I renovated the house, removing all traces of our life together and creating a space that felt truly mine. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage, discovering that many of them had never liked Gregory, but had stayed silent out of politeness. "He always seemed like he was performing," my friend Jessica said over dinner one evening. "Like he was playing the role of a successful businessman, but did not actually know what he was doing. You were the competent one, but he took all the credit." Her observation validated what I had learned through painful experience. Gregory had been a performance, all charm and confidence with no substance underneath. I had provided the substance while he claimed the spotlight. The pharmaceutical distribution business required constant attention to regulatory compliance, inventory management, and relationship maintenance. These were not glamorous tasks, but they were essential. I had always understood that, while Gregory had viewed them as beneath his notice. Now, running the company alone, I could structure operations exactly as they should be, without his interference or his theft. One afternoon in June, I received a call from Sylvia. "Gregory accepted the plea deal this morning. He pled guilty to 2 counts of embezzlement and 1 count of fraud. The other charges were dropped as part of the agreement. He has been sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 2 years of probation. He also has to pay significant restitution and fines, though frankly I doubt he has the resources to pay much of it." 3 years in prison. The man who had planned to leave me destitute while he lived comfortably with his mistress was now headed to prison. The justice of it satisfied something deep within me. "What about Valerie?" I asked. "She got probation and community service in exchange for her cooperation. She also has to repay the $75,000 she received, with interest. Her legal career is essentially over. No one wants to hire someone convicted of fraud, even if she avoided prison time." After hanging up with Sylvia, I sat in my office, looking out over the city. The journey from discovering Gregory's betrayal to this moment had been exhausting and often painful. I had been forced to become someone harder, more cynical, more willing to fight. But I had survived, and more than that, I had won completely. The business continued to expand through the summer. I secured a major contract with a regional hospital system, significantly increasing our revenue. I hired a financial officer named Grace, who brought expertise in corporate finance and helped me structure the company for long-term growth. Under my leadership, the business was achieving success Gregory had only pretended to generate. One evening in August, I attended an industry conference in Denver. These events had always made me uncomfortable when I attended with Gregory, as he would work the room while I stood awkwardly to the side, my contributions invisible. This time, I attended alone, and the difference was striking. "Mary, I heard you took over the business," said Andrew, the CEO of a competing firm. "I have been impressed with what you are doing." Your company has a reputation for reliability and integrity that is rare in this industry. Reliability and integrity. The qualities I had always brought to the business, now recognized without Gregory to claim credit. We talked about potential partnerships, and Andrew suggested we meet to discuss collaborative opportunities. It was the kind of business development Gregory had claimed to excel at, but I was doing it through competence rather than performance. I left the conference with several promising contacts and a renewed sense of confidence. I had not just survived Gregory's betrayal. I had built something better without him. The company was more profitable, my reputation was stronger, and my future was mine to control. Autumn arrived with cooler temperatures and changing leaves. Gregory began serving his prison sentence at a minimum security facility outside Denver. I learned this through Sylvia, who occasionally updated me on his situation. He had been assigned to work in the prison kitchen and was reportedly struggling with the loss of freedom and status. He keeps insisting he is innocent to the other inmates, Sylvia told me with obvious amusement. Apparently everyone in prison is innocent, but the reality is he is serving time for crimes he committed, and no amount of denial changes that. I felt no satisfaction in his suffering, but I felt no sympathy either. He had made his choices, and consequences were simply the natural result of those choices. He had stolen, lied, and betrayed. Now he was in prison. The cause and effect was straightforward. Valerie had moved away from Denver, unable to find work, and unwilling to face the social consequences of her actions. According to mutual acquaintances, she had relocated to another state, trying to start over with a damaged reputation and legal problems following her. Her relationship with Gregory, such as it was, had dissolved the moment legal trouble arrived. She had wanted money and excitement, not loyalty or responsibility. The business reached new milestones. We expanded into 2 additional states, hired 15 new employees, and doubled our revenue compared to the previous year. Every success felt like vindication, proof that I had never needed Gregory's supposed expertise. The company thrived precisely because I had removed his fraud and incompetence. Patricia was promoted to Vice President of Operations, and together we developed strategic plans for continued expansion. Grace restructured our finances, eliminating inefficiencies and maximizing profitability. Kevin built legitimate client relationships based on quality service. I had assembled a team of competent professionals who actually did their jobs, and the results spoke for themselves. One December afternoon, I sat in my office reviewing the year-end financial reports. The numbers were extraordinary. The company was worth over $4 million now, and the growth trajectory suggested even greater success ahead. I thought about Gregory's prediction in court, his confidence that he would walk away rich while I got nothing. The reality was precisely the opposite. My phone rang. It was Janet, calling to inform me that all legal matters related to the divorce were now completely resolved. Every asset has been transferred, every document has been filed, every requirement has been met. You are officially free of him in every legal sense. Thank you, I said, for everything. You did the hard work, Janet replied. I just helped you document it and present it effectively. You were the one who investigated, prepared, and fought. You earned this outcome. After we hung up, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. 18 months ago, I had been a woman whose husband was betraying her, stealing from their joint business, and planning to leave her destitute. I had been afraid, hurt, and uncertain. Now I was the sole owner of a thriving company, financially secure and completely independent. The transformation had required becoming someone harder and more calculating than I had ever imagined, but it had been necessary. I thought about Gregory in prison, stripped of everything he had valued: money, status, freedom, respect. He had gambled that I was too naive or too weak to discover his fraud. He had lost that gamble catastrophically. Every consequence he suffered was directly traceable to his own choices. He had created his own destruction through arrogance and greed. Valerie had fled to another state, her reputation destroyed and her legal troubles following her. She had participated eagerly in Gregory's scheme, enjoying the benefits without considering the cost. Now she was paying that cost, required to repay money she no longer had, and marked permanently by her conviction for fraud. Her future prospects were dim, limited by her own poor judgment and criminal record. As for me, I built something real. The pharmaceutical distribution company operated with integrity, treated employees fairly, served clients reliably, and generated substantial profits. It was everything a business should be. Everything I had always tried to make it, even when Gregory was sabotaging my efforts. Now, without his interference, the company reached its full potential. I stood and walked to the window, looking out over Denver as evening lights began to glow across the city. The view was familiar, but my perspective had changed fundamentally. I was no longer someone who tolerated betrayal or accepted limitation. I was someone who investigated, prepared, and fought. I had faced deception and overcome it completely. The revenge I had taken was not impulsive or emotional. It was methodical and thorough, built on evidence and executed through legal channels. I had not destroyed Gregory. He had destroyed himself through his own fraud. I had simply ensured that his destruction was complete, and that I survived and thrived in its aftermath. Gregory served his full 3-year sentence with no early release, his attempts at appeal denied by courts that found no merit in his claims of innocence. Upon release, he faced 2 years of probation, substantial restitution payments he would spend decades trying to fulfill, and a permanent criminal record that made employment nearly impossible. He worked a series of low-wage jobs, his professional reputation destroyed beyond repair. Valerie remained in another state. Her fraud conviction and requirement to repay $75,000, haunting every attempt to rebuild her life. She managed to find work in retail, a far cry from the luxurious lifestyle she had enjoyed while spending money stolen from my business. Both of them learned, too late, that fraud always extracts its price. I built the pharmaceutical distribution company into one of the most respected firms in the region, known for operational excellence and unwavering integrity. The business that Gregory had tried to steal and destroy became my greatest success, proof that competence and honesty ultimately prevailed over charm and deception. Standing in my office, watching the sunset paint Denver in shades of gold and amber, I reflected on the journey from betrayed wife to successful business owner. The revenge I had taken was not bitter or destructive. It was simply the natural consequence of truth confronting lies. Gregory had underestimated me completely, and that single mistake had cost him everything. I had no regrets about the path I had chosen, only satisfaction that justice had been thoroughly and completely served.